Hey, Miguel and back here on the CRP, and it's Saturday, August 3rd, and we are going to be talking about UFC on ESPN 5, the card coming to us live in the afternoon from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. And the main event, Colby Covington, Robbie Lawler. I'm joined by Devin Miller, my ace in the hole here for MMA stuff. Dev, how'd you see the main event here, Covington winding up with a wide unanimous decision?
Well, the fight went as I pretty much expected on our wagerage this week. My exact words were that I believe the pressure of Colby Covington would be the difference. And just right from the opening bell, he comes straight out and he's right in Robbie's face. And it made Robbie a little hesitant to pull the trigger. Robbie was trying to rope a dope, take it into the later rounds, roll with the punch as well, and try to play a long game. Colby seemed to be well prepared and well schooled for that, probably because they both had a lot of time at ATT, and Robbie's probably, I mean, those same guys down there have seen Robbie prepare for 5-round fights in that way, that he's gonna try to carry the fight into deep water and conserve energy and seek to land a hard counter somewhere in the fight. The thing is, Robbie shut that down. Colby shut that down not only by staying defensively sharp and not really overcommitting too much with his strikes, but he also was mixing it up with takedowns, which, just taking all emotion of Colby Covington and his character out, he's a phenomenal wrestler. And he was mixing up his boxing with his wrestling very well. He was doing a real good job of keeping range. He had his shoulders and his hands up well. And Robbie never was able to really get loose enough to really start opening up with his strikes. And it just kind of shut him down. And the wrestling and the top game and the pressure was just too much. And Colby just kind of bullied him for 5 rounds. I had a 50-45.
Yeah, one judge had a 50-44. I wonder which round he gave Colby a 10-8 on. I don't think it really matters. I think that, with a guy like Lawler, one of the things we credited him with on the pre-fight was experience, and his experience would be how, and he tried to play that game, and it actually backfired for him here too. And I think what happens too is he's also been in fights like this where he's a little outclassed, and he's tough enough that he's not going to take it out, so he's there for the duration, taking it, and you can kind of see him fall into that rut of like, all right, he did pretty good in the first round. He shook his head, yeah, sure, he's all right. That's what he's got, and he never came out of that. And, again, because maybe he's experienced that before, he was in that rut, and you just got the feeling that Lawler never got off. Covington deserves all. He's going to get a lot of credit. I don't know if the UFC's new, announcement team there doesn't go over the top on some of this stuff. I mean, I definitely think it was an impressive performance, but there are a couple of things you could, at no point I think was Lawler in danger of being stopped or, was Covington ever able to apply the type of pressure that makes you think he's going to try to finish the fight. It's just a constant simmer. You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't, obviously he wins fights and it doesn't, there's nothing that you can really say against it except for that you do toe the line with being crowd pleasing and not crowd pleasing at times with that style. So we'll see. But in this fight, Lawler's always in the game, so it was a tense fight throughout.
Yeah, and I really think Robbie, defensively was pretty sharp, and there was always a chance he was going to land a hard counter. But the thing with Robbie Lawler, it reminded me a lot of the Carlos Condit fight, where I actually expected him to be coming on a little bit stronger in the 5th round, like he did in the Condit fight, and he never really did in this. Is he just sometimes just takes too many rounds off? He doesn't go for it, and I think it's a combination of trying to conserve energy for 5 rounds, also trying to pick his shots wisely, let his opponent kind of get comfortable and open up and vulnerable, catch him sleeping, but. That kind of played well in the 2 Johnny Hendricks fights, and it played real well in the Rory McDonald fight. But sometimes he's giving away fights with that stuff.
There's a lot of psychology in a guy like Lawler. His place in MMA does come, into play sometimes. You know, you're fighting Robbie Lawler. The guy's been through a lot of wars. Seen it all and stuff like that. So you carry that in with you, and then, you know, in the fights, you always got to give him credit for being in a fight and stuff like that. But like I said, I wonder if at some point, what you have to do is I mean, that's the right place to give Covington credit to, because he just didn't let him. And at the end of the day, you could sit back and you know, wait for the later rounds to catch the guy in the later rounds and stuff like that. But you got to be doing some damage. You know, if you're just counting on Covington to run out of gas, you know, he's the wrong guy to do that with, I think, because he's shown a good gas tank. And, you know, in this fight, I think he showed a good gas tank. He was pretty relentless. And, you know, that says it all. If you're not doing damage to him, you're not going to slow. He's going to slow you down more than you're slowing him down. There is that delicate balance, you know. So, you know, Robbie selected to throw like no punches at the end. You know, I think it was at the end of round 2 for the sequence where they were standing up, or perhaps it was round 3, but no punches while letting Covington play himself out. So he's giving a round away, and at the same time, he was starting to get cut. You know, he was every once in a while getting taken down, which is the effort of getting put back up and things like that. You know, and Covington was definitely taking more out of him than he did. You know, he didn't work the body, he didn't do any of the other things that Covington, you know, may have been susceptible to. So that you get that at the end of at the end, Covington still had more going into round 5.
Yeah, and talking a little bit now about the post-fight, you know, and where we go from here. I mean, I think that most likely we're going to see Usman versus Covington now. And Covington, as I mentioned going in, you know, he had the Trump sons there today, and he's really kind of embraced the villain role. But in my opinion, Miguel, he took it way too far today on his post-fight interview, which, you know, I made a comment to my cousin, and he shot back, well, that's exactly what Colby Covington's wanting the emotions Colby Covington's wanting out of fans right now, is he wants people to hate him because it's getting him that title fight, it's getting him that attention. He's embracing being that villain. But for him to go on the mic afterwards and his exact quote, which I don't know if it's exact, but pretty much word for word, was when they asked him about Robbie Lawler, he said he should have taken a lesson from his buddy Matt Hughes, and to stay off the track when a train's coming, whether it's an actual train or the Colby train. And I thought that was a tasteless comment. I mean, I understand being provoking. You know, we all remember all the things Conor McGregor, you know, he's not going to apologize to absolutely anybody. And, you know, him jumping in the crowd and getting in Jose Aldo's face and all the mockery that he gave of a great, long, reigning champion like Jose Aldo. And he was very, you know, careless of what people's opinions were of him, and it was entertaining. But there's just a certain line, in my opinion, that you don't cross. There's still a measure of class that needs to be there, and you know, for him to be in Brazil and taunt the entire crowd and the entire nation, and then to now kind of throw a jab at Matt Hughes, and when we all know the kind of condition that he's in. I thought it was tasteless, and I think he's going to get the fight with Usman, but any sort of benefit of the doubt that I was starting to give Colby, as just kind of an act, just kind of a charade, and he's backing it up with performances, kind of went out the window, because I don't think it's charade if you would make a comment like that.
Yeah, no, I question the guy's IQ. You know, I mean, you're after a fight and you're running around. You know, you got adrenaline and the whole rush and everything like that. It's hard to equate, you know, how in control you are. You'll probably regret that. The bottom line is, you know, on the broadcast they kept referring to his sponsorship from AT&T, and they referred openly to Dan Lambert. So, you know, Dan Lambert's part of Matt Hughes' recovery team as well. You know, he's part of the people that are helping support Matt. I mean, Matt's able to take care of himself, thankfully, financially and stuff like that. But, you know, Dan's been behind the scenes actively helping to care for Matt. So I'm sure Colby's going to be talked to a little bit behind the scenes by his own team about that. because I don't think I think exactly what I don't think he gets anything accomplished. I think if you want to play the hated role, I think it's okay to be hated. But now, once you cross a certain line, I agree with you. I think you cross. The bottom line is if I want to call out, for example, someone like I don't know, Boss Rutan. Now, Boss is older now. He's probably not going to get in the ring, but at least Boss will, uh, get on a mic and talk to himself. Matt Hughes is a pretty defenseless at this point. That makes it pretty crass what he did. Lawler didn't address it in the immediate aftermath in the ring. We'll see if it comes up in the post fight, interviews and stuff like that, which I'm going to go watch as soon as we get done here. The second fight obviously had the veterans Clay and Guida and Jim Miller, and Miller fighting at home. I think that's a real feel-good story for Jim. Being able to win at home against a classic guy. I think it was a brief fight, but the fight was in question. They were starting to throw, and both guys, veterans. I think one of the guys on the broadcast, it may have been Dominic Cruz. I think he hit the nail right on the head. These guys, are relatively unique in their sturdiness and their ability. The fact that they're both relatively fighting similar styles to when they did at the same, at the outset, which, Guida likes to push the pace and Miller can be tricky. And, it still works for them. Their bodies have held up over all these years. And that's a real tribute to them that they're still able to perform. And it was a great fight, while it lasted. Miller, like I said, it was in doubt for a minute, but Miller, established himself and got the big win at home. Heartwarming for me. I like seeing the old guys when they write nice finishes for themselves. What you think?
Well, I mentioned this in our pre-fight that the thing I like about this matchup is that it's just appropriate matchmaking for this stage of these guys' career. These guys were both at one point top 10 contenders. Jim Miller, I believe, was even ranked in the top 5 and on a really heavy win streak at one point. So I think this was appropriate matchmaking for this stage of their career. Jim Miller is now, I think, has had more fights inside the octagon than any fighter in history, I think they were saying tonight. And I think he's now tied for like 4th or 3rd in all-time wins inside the octagon, behind only Cerrone and Damian Maia. I think this was his 20th win inside the octagon. So longevity is really impressive. I mean, this is a guy that's been fighting 4 or 5 times a year for several years. And, he's had a very solid past decade of just consistency. Guys like him and Diego Sanchez and Donald Cerrone and Damian Maia and Michael Bisping, these are guys that never were able to really attain to be the best in their division, but they were always very consistent and endured for a long time. So both him and Guida have nothing but respect for me. From me, I like this matchmaking at this stage of their career, and good win for Jim Miller. He's now 3-1 in his last 4. So and he looked good tonight, and I think he's got some more fight in him. So I expect him to get a few more wins before he hangs up the gloves.
Yeah, definitely interested. Any shout outs on the rest of the card here?
Well, I definitely think we gotta give a shout out to a young 23-year-old that won in the third to the last fight, Nasrat Hakparest. He finishes Yoakum Silva in the second round. He's a very impressive kid that I think we need to keep our eye on. And Mickey Gall got back in the win column. A former CRP prospect of the week, Kennedy Nzechukwu, picked up a win tonight. And further on down the card, Valentina Shevchenko's sister bounced back from her loss over Roxanne Modaffari to pick up a rear naked choke in the second round today. And then there's a 125 guy that is on a 4-fight win streak now, Matt Schnell down at flyweight, who's been making some noise, and he looked really good. And then the last one that I would say is Claudio Silva, who was the second fight of the night. He's a quiet individual in the sport. He's 36 years old, has a really good record. I think he's like 13 or 14-1 now, but he's 5-0 inside the octagon, including a win over Leon Edwards by split decision back in 2014. At welterweight, he's 5-0. But the thing is, and the reason why we don't see him ranked and we don't hear much about him is those 5 wins have been spanned over the period of 5.5 years. So he's been very inactive But nevertheless, technically, all 5 times he's got inside the octagon, he's won, and his last 3 wins have been by finish, by submitting his guy and getting him out of there. So, Claudio Silva, I think, is somebody that maybe he can start being a little bit more active. He's 36 years old, so he needs to get to it. But 14-1 and an undefeated welterweight and with a win over even Leon Edwards. So he's kind of a sleeper guy in the organization, but he pulled off another win tonight, finish win. So.
Yep, and I'll close the show out with a quick shout out to Joe Meershirt, Wisconsin product out of the same gym as Duke Rufus and that group, and he submitted Trevin Giles, and he showed a complete game. Able to use his striking to set up his takedowns, get the fight to the ground, and control, and eventually set up the submission. He also shaved, and I laughed because I was thinking the exact same thing when the announcer mentioned it. Is that he really does look like Stefan Bonner with the shave.
Yeah, and this was a much needed win for Meerschaert. He's a guy who came in and went, I think, 4-1 inside the octagon. His lone loss was a loss to Thiago Santos, and then he dropped a pair of fights to Jack Hermanson and Kevin Holland and picks up a win here. But now, when you look at his career inside the octagon, he's now 5-3 inside the octagon, and 2 of those losses were to Thiago Santos and Jack Hermanson. There's not really anything to, those are tough guys. Those are elite.
Yeah, those will turn out to be feathers in his cap.
Yeah, Thiago Santos just went 5 hard rounds on one leg with like a literally destroyed knee. Doctors can't even explain it, against John Jones. And Hermanson's a top 5 middleweight right now, getting ready to fight Kelvin Gastelum and just beat Jacare. And so he's only and Kevin Holland's a good fighter too, and that was a split decision. So Meerschaert's resume, it's funny how when somebody gets back in the win column and you look back, you can start seeing that that sometimes their just record doesn't always tell a story. You got to look a little bit deeper into the devil's in the details.
You got to see the fights. If you're not watching the fights, then you're really at this point, just getting a gloss over. And it is important to see. And like I said, he looked like he progressed. And in the shout outs afterwards, he gave speak to his conditioning coaches and things like that. And he felt that, pulling the submission out in the 3rd round showed that, he'd made that leap to the next level. So definitely a performance worth noting there.
And one more fun fact about Meerschaert that I just looked at his resume, and I think that needs notice. All 5 of those wins, like I mentioned, he's 5-3 now, and we went over his losses are to good competition, but all 5 of those wins are finishes also inside the UFC. So he's 5-3, and all 5 of those, the ones that he's won, have been finishes. So he's clearly not a boring fighter. He's not going anywhere on the resume, on the record, on the roster. So
yeah, and anytime when you get a guy like him that at least for what he showed as a tendency, that he gets on the ground and he's working for a finish and things like that, it does make a difference. There's a place like that for guys in the UFC. It does shake things up and give you a little bit of a different style because, everybody does know just about everything everybody else knows at this point, So the sport has evolved to that level. It's style-wise, at the individual level that you can hopefully get to some different, matchups. And Meerschaert shows a good mix of groundwork today for another finish. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's he's a guy that, let's see what he does next because, that the devil's in the details. Like you said, the devil's when the UFC asks you to make a jump and maybe you're not ready for it. So we'll see how the matchmaking goes for him next. Mm-hmm. I'm Miguel Devin, and that's Devin Miller. We're reviewing the ESPN 5 card for the UFC. They came live to us Saturday afternoon, August 3rd from the Prudential Center. Colby Covington locks up his title shot against Kamaru Usman with a convincing win over Robbie Lawler. And we've also commented on some of the other card immediate impressions. I'm Miguel Devin for the CRP.